In this video, I am going to walk through DeadPXLZ step by step. I will start by setting up an account and connecting a Cardano wallet. Then I will explain how forging works and show the full process directly on screen. You will see how attributes are forged, how transactions are reviewed and signed, and how everything is confirmed on the blockchain. I will also show how to verify the transactions using a Cardano Explorer and how the assets appear inside the DeadPXLZ ecosystem. This is a practical walkthrough focused on what I'm doing, what you see on screen, and how each step works. No speculation, no extras, just the actual process from start to finish. Let's get started. I start by creating my account. I connect my wallet first, and I make sure the connection goes through so the platform can recognize me. Once the wallet is connected, I look for the account setup area and I enter my username. I type it clearly because this name is what I will use inside the experience. After I confirm the username, the account is created and tied to the wallet I just connected. Visually, this step is mostly about seeing the wallet connection status and the username field. I check that the wallet shows as connected and that my username is saved. If the screen updates to show me as logged in, I know the account setup is complete. Now I move into the section where I learn what forging is. This part is an overview, so I am not signing any transactions yet. I am just looking at the forging interface and the information shown on screen. The goal here is to understand how forging works before actually doing it. On the screen, I can see that forging is the process used to create PXL assets. These assets are built by selecting a base and adding attributes. Each attribute represents a specific visual element and functionality, and forging requires ADA to complete. At this stage, I am not choosing anything yet. I am just reviewing how the system is structured. I pay attention to how the interface explains slots and attributes. I can see that attributes are added into available slots, and each slot can hold one attribute. The overview helps me understand that once something is forged, it cannot be changed, so the choice matters. That is why this overview step is important, because it shows me what decisions I will need to make later. I also take note of the cost displayed. Forging uses ADA, and each attribute has its own price. The overview does not require me to spend anything, but it shows where the prices are displayed and how the confirmation flow will look when I actually forge. This helps me recognize the transaction screen when it appears later. Visually, this step is about reading and observing. I scroll through the forging section, look at the available options, and understand the layout of the interface. I make sure I understand where attributes are selected, where costs are shown, and where the action buttons are located. Once I finish reviewing this overview, I now understand what forging means. In this context, how attributes are created, and what will happen when I move forward to actually forge my first item. Now I move into the section where I actually forge an attribute. In this step, I am forging a chain. I can see the chain option available in the forging interface, and the cost is clearly shown as 10 ADA. I select the chain attribute and I make sure it is highlighted, so I know this is the item I am about to forge. On the screen, I can see the available slots where attributes can be placed. I choose an open slot and assign the chain to that slot. The interface updates to reflect my selection, showing the chain as part of my forged PXL setup. I pause for a moment to confirm that everything looks correct, especially the attribute name and the cost. Before moving forward, I check the total ADA required for this action. The cost for forging the chain is 10 ADA, and this is clearly displayed before I continue. At this point, I am still inside the application and no transaction has been signed yet. This step is about preparing the forge and confirming my choice. Once I am sure the chain is selected, I proceed to the next action, which triggers the transaction flow. The interface indicates that I'm about to forge the chain attribute and that a wallet confirmation will be required. This makes it clear that forging is an on-chain action and that my wallet will be used to approve it. Visually, this step shows the forging screen, the selected chain attribute, the slot it will occupy, and the ADA cost associated with it. I do not rush through this because once the forge is completed, the attribute cannot be changed. So I take a final look at the selection, confirm that it is the chain, confirm the 10 ADA cost, and prepare to move on to the transaction review and signing in the next step. Now I am reviewing the transaction before signing it. The wallet window opens and I can see the full transaction details. I slow down here because this is where I confirm exactly what is happening on chain. I check the ADA amount and I confirm that the cost matches what I selected in the forging screen. I look at the assets involved in the transaction and I can see that I will receive 2 assets as a result of this forge. The wallet interface shows the incoming assets clearly along with the ADA being spent. I also review the output and input addresses, making sure the transaction is interacting with the expected smart contract. After reviewing the details, I sign the transaction. Once it is signed, the wallet submits it to the Cardano blockchain. At this point, the interface returns me to the application and I can see a pending state while the transaction is being processed. Nothing happens instantly, so I wait. Knowing this depends on blockchain confirmation. While waiting, the screen indicates that the transaction has been submitted. I stay on this view until the confirmation comes through. After the blockchain validates the transaction, the application updates and I can see that the forge has completed. This confirms that the chain attribute has been successfully created. Once the transaction is confirmed, I move back to the forging interface. Now I review the available slots again. I can see that one slot is now occupied, showing the chain attribute inside it. The remaining slots are still empty, which tells me I can continue forging additional attributes later. Visually, this step connects the wallet confirmation with the in-app result. I can clearly see how a signed transaction turns into a visible asset in my account. This helps me understand the full loop from selecting an attribute to signing the transaction to seeing the result reflected on screen. With the chain successfully forged and the slots updated, I am ready to continue to the next forging action. Now I move on to forging another attribute. This time I'm forging a cigarette. Just like before, I start by selecting the cigarette option from the available attributes. I can see it listed in the forging interface and I make sure I select it intentionally so there is no confusion about what I'm about to create. Once selected, I look at the available slots again. One of the slots is already occupied by the chain from the previous step, and I choose a new empty slot for the cigarette. The interface updates to show the cigarette assigned to that slot. This visual confirmation helps me verify that I am adding a second attribute correctly. Before proceeding, I review the transaction details that are shown in the application. Just like the previous forge, the interface prepares a transaction that will require wallet approval. I check the ADA cost displayed on screen and confirm that it matches the cigarette forge cost. I do not rush because once this is completed, the attribute cannot be changed or removed from this PXL. After confirming everything looks correct, I continue to the wallet confirmation step. The wallet opens again and I review the transaction details carefully. I verify the ADA amount, confirm the assets involved and check the transaction outputs. Once everything matches what I expect, I sign the transaction. After signing, the transaction is submitted to the Cardano blockchain. I return to the application where I see the pending state while the transaction is being confirmed. I wait for the blockchain to process it, knowing this step depends entirely on network confirmation. When the transaction is confirmed, the interface updates. I can now see the cigarette attribute added to my forged PXL. The slot is filled, and both attributes, the chain and the cigarette, are now visible. This confirms that the second forging action was successful, and that my PXL is continuing to take shape. Now I move to the Cardano Scan Explorer to verify the transaction on chain. I open the Explorer in my browser and I paste the transaction hash from the previous step. This allows me to look directly at the transaction data recorded on the blockchain. On the screen, I can see the transaction summary, including the status, the block confirmation, and the timestamp. This confirms that the transaction has been successfully included in the blockchain. I scroll down to review the transaction details, focusing on the inputs and outputs to make sure everything matches what I approved in my wallet. Next, I look at the metadata section of the transaction. This is where additional information about the forged attribute is stored. The metadata helps confirm that this transaction is tied to the forging action I just performed. I review the values shown, making sure they correspond to the cigarette attribute I forged. This step is important because it shows how the forging action is recorded transparently on chain. As I continue scrolling, I verify the assets involved in the transaction. I can see the assets that were minted or transferred as part of this forge, and I confirm that they align with what the application displayed earlier. This gives me confidence that the on-chain data matches the in-app result and that nothing unexpected occurred. Once I see that the transaction is fully confirmed, I know the forging process is complete. The Explorer shows that the transaction is no longer pending and that it has been finalized. This confirmation step helps me understand the full life cycle of a forge, from initiating it in the app to signing it in the wallet and finally verifying it on the blockchain. After reviewing the transaction and its metadata, I close the Explorer. Knowing the transaction is confirmed, I am ready to return to the application and continue with the next part of the tutorial. Now I go to the DeadPXLZ Explorer, I open it in my browser, and once the page loads, I connect my Cardano wallet. Just like before, I make sure the wallet connection is successful so the Explorer can read the assets associated with my address. When the connection is confirmed, the interface updates to show content linked to my wallet. I start by browsing through some of the PXL NFTs shown in the Explorer. I click into a few of them and visually review their characteristics. I can see details like attributes and other information tied to each PXL. This step is mostly about observing and understanding how PXL NFTs are displayed and how their data is presented inside the Explorer. I take my time scrolling through, opening different entries and getting familiar with the layout. As I review the PXL NFTs, I pay attention to how attributes are listed and how each PXL has its own set of characteristics. This helps me connect what I forged earlier with how assets appear inside the broader ecosystem. Everything I see here reflects on-chain data, so the Explorer becomes a way to inspect assets directly without relying only on the forging interface. After looking through several PXL NFTs, I move on to the next section. I navigate to the Ding Royale area. The transition is visible on screen as the interface switches from the General Explorer view to the Ding Royale section. I confirm that my wallet is still connected since this section also relies on wallet interaction. At this point, I am not performing any actions inside Ding Royale, yet I am just arriving at the section and confirming that I can access it. The screen shows the entry point to Ding Royale, indicating that this is where participation and tiers will be handled later. With the Explorer reviewed, the wallet connected, and Ding Royale opened, I am ready to continue to the final step of the tutorial where I review what Ding Royale is and where the journey ends. Now I review what Ding Royale is by looking at the information provided in the white paper. I focus on understanding the full journey of a user going through this process. I read through how participation works, what actions a user can take, and how the flow is structured from start to finish. This step is about comprehension, not execution, so I am not signing transactions or selecting anything yet. After reviewing the explanation, I move into the actual Ding Royale platform. The interface loads and takes me to the dashboard. On screen, I can clearly see different participation tiers. Each tier is displayed with an ADA amount starting from 50 ADA and going up to 10,000 ADA. The layout makes it easy to compare the tiers visually and understand the range of options available. I scroll through the dashboard slowly, making sure I see all the tier options. Each tier is selectable and the amounts are clearly labeled. I do not choose any tier in this tutorial. I am only observing how the selection works and where a user would interact if they decided to participate. This helps me understand the entry points without committing to an action. I also confirm that my wallet is still connected while viewing the dashboard. This is important because participation would require a connected wallet. Even though I am not proceeding further, I verify that the platform recognizes my wallet and allows access to the dashboard. At this point, I stop the process here. I do not select a tier, submit a transaction, or move beyond the dashboard. The goal of this step is simply to reach Ding Royale, understand what it is, see how the tiers are presented, and conclude the tutorial. With the dashboard reviewed and no further actions taken, this is where the tutorial ends. Thank you so much for watching to this episode, and before I go, don't forget, if you'd like to receive a very short but value-packed email from me every Tuesday, you can sign up for the Cardano Gaming newsletter. Every Tuesday, I'll be sharing the latest from the Cardano Gaming ecosystem to help you make better decisions. So if you don't want to miss out, just go to the link on the screen, leave me your email, and very soon I'll be in your inbox. That's all for today. I hope you have a great week.